It had red eyes.
And we saw something that was solid white.
Somebody else saw it. And then after that, somebody else saw it.
In 1974, several people in and around Flintville, Tennessee began reporting sightings of a large bipedal creature. Most accounts were of a large solid white creature, while others stated the ones they saw were dark brown or black. Former local TV personality Ray Stillman's fall of 1973 sighting was the first reported account of what would later be deemed the Flintville Monster.
The state of Tennessee, back, I'm not sure exactly when they did it, but they put a bounty on gray fox and bobcats. You didn't even have to skin them. There was a tannery there in at the bottom of Fire Hall Hill in Fayetteville. You could just take the whole animal down there. In fact, if you ran over one on the road, you could take it. It was $30, and you didn't even have to clean it. Just pick it up, take it down there. And $30 back then was pretty good. I was big into hunting back then. I had, if you can believe this, I had 23 beagle hounds at one time. It got to the point it was pretty easy, to be honest with you. I could take a rabbit call, I could call them up within just a few feet of us. It got to be murder almost. In fact, it got so easy, we started doing it with a bow and arrow. What we'd do, we'd get out in the middle of a field. We'd find a big open area, and we'd get out there. And the best time was when the moon was full and, there was a lot of light. You could see them come in there. We had to be careful. We didn't try to spotlight them or anything, but you could see them. It wasn't any problem to see them. But on this particular night that we saw Bigfoot, it was pitch dark. I mean, it was dark out there that night, and it was kind of spooky anyway. And we got in the middle of a big old field between Kelso and Flintville, and I had a pickup truck, and we'd put hay back in the back, and we get up on that hay and sit there and call his foxes in. And so I was blowing on the fox call on that night, and we had 2 foxes that we saw come in, and they were getting closer and closer. So we just sitting there waiting on them. And then all of a sudden they were gone. I mean, they disappeared, and that never has happened before. So we knew something had spooked them. Well, we didn't see this Bigfoot at first. I'm gonna call him Bigfoot. We didn't see it at first, but we heard it. He didn't groan, didn't make any sound, but that rabbit call absolutely was driving him crazy. And he was crashing through the brush back there, blackberry bushes, and we saw him. We looked off to our right, which was to our south. He was coming in, and he was going wild. Well, I'd blow that call, and he'd hunker down. He'd stand up. He'd hunker down, stand up, bend over. He was hitting tree limbs and making all kind of noise. He wasn't quiet at all. We probably watched him for, I'd say, we saw him for a good 10 minutes. No question about it. We were trying to figure out exactly what we were seeing, because nobody else up there had seen this thing. We were the first ones to see him. And it's recorded in some of these Bigfoot associations have called us, and Bigfoot groups, and they have us listed as the first sighting of the Flintville Monster, which they called it. Anyway, it washed us. And I tell you the strange thing about it, it had red eyes. And we've never seen anything. I've hunted since I was 10 years old. We never have seen anything with red eyes. Well, I've since learned that the alligator's about the only thing with red eyes. And it wasn't hard to see it. We took a flashlight, and we'd shine a flashlight over there, and those eyes just beamed, big, bright red eyes, and he was going wild. We didn't know what to do, really. We could have shot it, to be honest with you, but we didn't know what we were shooting, number one, and I thought, well, we may shoot that thing, go over, and he's got a zipper up his back or something. I don't want to get into that, but there's no question it was not anybody. It was a wild creature, because it had all the features of a wild creature, and I'm going to estimate. It was hard out there in the dark to know exactly how big it was, but I'm going to say it was 7 to 8 feet tall for sure. And It watched us, and I'd blow the call and played with it really for a while. Well, it circled us, or did a semicircle. He stayed back in the brush. We could see him, but we couldn't. He wouldn't come out in the open. But he circled us, and when it got downwind of us, he picked up our odor. And when he did that, boy, he took off. It took off exactly the way it came in, on a dead run, just running over stuff, knocking tree limbs. The bushes were shaking out there. He went out exactly on the same route that he came in on. That was the only road in that field. So we sat there and said, now how are we going to get out of here? Because it went out right there. We waited a while, and we got it back in the truck, and it was cold that night. I remember that. It was in the fall of the year, but the leaves were still on the trees. It was early in the fall. And we eased back down that trail, and we watched, there's a dirt road coming in out there. We watched every move up until we got out of there, and never saw it again. Never saw another trace of it or anything. Well, naturally, you go to all your buddies and tell your buddies about it. They're rolling their eyes, and nobody wanted to believe much what we'd seen, but we told everybody about it. And then not long after that, somebody else saw it. I don't remember exactly who saw it next. It got around the community that this thing was really real and it was really out there. So they finally believed our story. And if you have read much about the sightings back in 1974, they didn't end in 1974. They went on I bet that thing was out there for at least 8 years, maybe 10, or they'd be spotted, or so at least people said they saw it. There was a guy in Fayetteville who's dead now, Stan Moore, good friend of mine. And Stan became the local expert on Bigfoot. And he got up there, he tracked it, he did everything. He had plaster footprints, he had feces, he had hair. He had quite a collection of Bigfoot stuff. And he was interviewed by, of course, TV stations came. I guess you know that much about the story, but we were bombarded with news media, newspapers, TV stations, they were all down here.
In April of 1976, shortly after Bigfoot was spotted by several witnesses, including deputy sheriffs as well as Mr. Moore, a 6-man posse was formed and chased the creature. Some members even discharged their weapons toward it. The creature was able to escape. Retired Tennessee game warden Mr. Don Odum recalls the uproar caused by the Flintville Monster, as well as the excitement caused by the Bigfoot hunting posse.
They were calling the Flintville Monster down there. And so people around the Lynchburg area and the Flintville area started seeing Sasquatch. It was funny in a way, but there was a time when all the good old boys, everybody had a rifle in their pickup truck and a CB radio, and the good old boys were riding around. They were hunting this thing as they were wanting to shoot one.
Author John Keel mentions the 1973 UFO flap, or wave, several times in his book, The Mothman Prophecies, the inspiration for the 2002 hit Richard Gere film by the same name. Mr. Keel mentions that increased cryptid sightings such as Mothman and Bigfoot often accompany increased UFO or UAP activity. Is it any coincidence that the Flintville Monster began appearing after this notable UFO wave that occurred in the Tennessee area?
See, 1973 was kind of a funny year because there were a lot of things going on. There was a great what they call a great UFO wave, which happened. It started about when we saw Bigfoot in the fall of 1973, went into 74, and if I remember right, part of 75, where they were seeing UFOs everywhere. They were seeing it in Nashville, Birmingham. It was kind of a rectangle from, I'd say, Nashville to Atlanta to Knoxville to Birmingham, back in that area right there. And they were being seen a lot. You can go back and double check that. Well, we learned later that most of the time, when there are a lot of UFO sightings, that Bigfoot, they have a lot of Bigfoot sightings also. So we dreamed up the idea that maybe this thing was brought down here and put out for some reason.
When I first came to Marshall County, it was in 74. Right off the bat, a lot of UFO activity from the UFO world. They would call that a flap in this area. Lots and lots of sightings. They were having reports on the Nashville news stations. at the same time that all this UFO activity was going on, I think one of the first connections that we saw with the Bigfoot was what they were calling the Flintville Monster. There were 2 cattle mutilations, one in Rutherford County and one at the edge of Rutherford and Bedford County. And I remember they made a big deal out of that. And the one in Rutherford County was a Holstein cow in the snow, and there were no tracks around, and there was no blood.
I didn't believe in that type of stuff at all. I didn't believe in Bigfoot. I don't believe in ghosts. But I tell you what, it changed my opinion, because today I don't say anything's impossible, because we saw it. We definitely saw it. I have no question in my mind what we saw, and it was not a anything other than a 2-legged biped, 7-8 foot tall, hairy, black with red eyes. It's made me a lot more receptive to, today we hear a lot of talk about aliens. It's big in the news today. It's made me a lot more receptive to the idea that, I don't say that's not going on. Could be that what we're hearing is absolutely true. I don't doubt that at all.
As Mr. Stillman mentions, the sightings did continue beyond the 1970s. In the mid-1980s, now principal of the Flintville School, David Golden, had a sighting of a large bipedal creature while out exploring with his brother and cousin. But sightings didn't stop there. Official reports of the Flintville Monster continue into the 21st century.
Number one, this is my home. I grew up here. I'm not just the principal of the school, local school. I'm a Flintville boy. And so growing up, I've always heard about our local legends and, the neat little parts about our community. Whether it's the Flintville Light, our local ghost story, or the Flintville Monster, which is our local Bigfoot story. My story is I'm not going to say I saw Bigfoot, but I will say that, when I was a kid and my brother and I, we have, our family has a farm. And we also, at that time when we were children, had the farm behind ours rented where we'd raise tobacco, had horses, cattle, things like that. And we would play back there as kids. And one day during the summer, we were on one of the hills, just playing around, exploring, so to say, and we saw something on the old railroad tracks that was solid white. It was a person walking, bipedal, 2 feet. That I can't argue that. Nobody can argue that, what we saw. Years later, when you think about where we were standing, and the railroad tracks were hundreds of yards away. So it would have had to have been big for us to see it. And we watched it walk for a while. And I don't know if you ever heard someone do an owl call with their hands, but you can do an owl call.
Yeah.
And I did one. And I would try to see if the person walking would answer back. And they didn't for a while. And then we heard the owl call back. And we had our cousin with us at the time, so all 3 of us thought, hey, he's answering back. So we tore out running across the fields. Now, to get to that point to where that person, or whatever it was, could have been, it took a few minutes. And by the time we got to the old railroad tracks, they were gone. So we walked down trying to find this person. And we ran into a family that was camping. And we said, hey, did you see this person dressed in all white? And they said, no, nobody came by here. That'd be what it said. And years later, growing up and kind of researching the neat parts about our community, you come across the legend of the Bigfoot Monster. And there is a case. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bigfoot Research Organization. And that's Matt Moneymaker. That they had the TV show and all those guys. Oh, yeah. Bobo and Matt and Renee. Well, on their website, there is somebody had sent in their sighting of an albino Bigfoot in that area around the same time frame as our, I guess you'd call it our sighting or whatever we saw there. And there's another incident a few years earlier of a Bigfoot sighting. And all this is in the area of our farm, which is in Golden Hollow, Golden Hollow Road, and Teal Hollow. And this is within minutes of each other, if you'd even call it that long of a time frame.
And what year was your sighting?
Somewhere between 1986 and 1989.
Okay, because I know the BFRO one we were discussing, that's from, I want to say it was either like 79 or 80, so right around the same time.
Yeah, those are not just the only ones.
Yeah.
There's actually a case, and I think it was in 1976, when, and that was on Teal Hollow Road, and I think that was the one that incorporated Sweet Springs Road, which veers off of Teal Hollow Road. The one where the Bigfoot was kind of violent and was chasing children and throwing rocks and things of that nature. So this area is very rich with the lore of Bigfoot, so to say.
The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization lists 5 encounters for Flintville's home in Lincoln County, Tennessee. 3 of these encounters are Class B encounters. A Class B Bigfoot sighting is one with less credibility, for example, seeing a creature at a great distance or simply hearing vocalizations. However, the site also lists 2 Class A's. Class A sightings are more up close and personal. The witness gets such a good look at the creature that other animals can usually be ruled out. The first Class A comes from BFRO report number 23823 in 1987 near Flintville, Tennessee on Teal Hollow Road. It was a fall night in 1987, and a 17-year-old was speeding down Teal Hollow Road in Tennessee, racing to make curfew. The road was dark, lined with thick woods, when something appeared on the shoulder. At first he thought it was a deer, until it stood up. Heart pounding, he hit the brakes, stopping 200 yards past it. But as he threw the car into reverse, his blood ran cold. The figure had stepped into the road behind him. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, almost as wide as his Camaro. No visible neck, just a dark, hulking silhouette. Panic set in. He slammed the car into drive and sped off, tires screeching. When he got home, he was still shaking, tears in his eyes. Even now, decades later, he refuses to drive that road at night. The second Class A comes from BFRO report 6638 in 2003 near Flintville, Tennessee on Sweet Springs Road. On a warm summer night, a young woman stepped outside to roll up her car windows. Then she heard it. A chilling holler from the nearby field. She turned and froze. A massive white figure loomed in the darkness. Panicked, she ran inside. The dogs erupted in chaos. Her sister's boyfriend grabbed a flashlight. Then a gun. Clicking their flashlights on, the beams cut through the night, revealing a towering, white, furred creature. It let out a deep growl. A gunshot rang out. The creature staggered, then disappeared into the trees.
Can you talk about, the giant gorilla that did live and was, lived up to just several thousand years ago, the Gigantopithecus, yes.
300,000 years ago.
Yeah. So when you think about the earth and the world, that's just a fragment of time. We do know that exists. Now, in my opinion, is it a giant ape? I don't think so. But could it be another humanoid figure or another, ancient hominid that did survive? I think that's, take a look at, we know Neanderthals did exist. You know that the Denisovians did exist. And there is a theory that it could be a Denisovian. And, there's a population of humans now that have, and they've proven it, have some genetic features that have the DNA of the Denisovians that allow them to live at a higher altitude. And that's scientifically proven. So we know these things did exist. And I can't talk about the science without talking about, the biblical part of it. And there is a biblical part of it. When you read the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it talks about the Nephilim. And it talks about the sons of God and the daughters of man. What we do know is the Bible teaches that they bred. that they had children. Created the Nephilim. Is ancient man telling us the story of how the Denisovians bred with modern with humans, and we do know that Neanderthals, it's been proven scientifically, bred with humans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So is ancient man, is the Bible telling us that story? I think it's possible. And, right here in our community, we have a lot of churches here. Faith is a big part of the Flintville community. It would be wrong not to talk about that for me to,
Mm-hmm.
and as a man of my own faith, but when you take a look at it and you read it as a book of faith, but when you look at the scientific part, is it possible? Is it possible? I think absolutely. And and there is even one of the books of the Bible that didn't make it, the non-canonical books.
Yeah.
And I can't remember which one that talks about the Watchers.
The Enoch, I believe.
Enoch, yes,
Yeah,
Book of
that's the
Enoch,
big one.
absolutely. And the way I understand it is they didn't talk, they just watched. I think that it's very thought-provoking to think that maybe that this is not just something that you watch and some people just kind of laugh it off. Maybe there is a real factor that there's something else out there. So when I was a teenager or preteen, my brother, my cousin, and I would play on this farm. We had tobacco here. Tobacco field was right over there. We'd work our tobacco in that barn right there, and we would explore a lot. Up on there was a place we called Eagle Point. You could go up there on that hill and look out and see all of this hollow, and you could have a good vision of the old railroad tracks, which were torn down in 1984. One day we were up there, and the way we got to Eagle Point was a game trail. We were walking on it and looking around. We saw a white figure from way back in the hollow walking on the railroad tracks. So we started doing an owl call just to try to see if they would answer back, and they never would. And we watched it walk all the way down the railroad tracks, and finally we decided, hey, let's go see if we can go talk to them. So we took off running through the fields, got up to the railroad tracks, got on the railroad tracks, and didn't see this figure. So we started walking and doing the owl call, and finally we heard an owl respond to us. So we took off running down the trail thinking this was whoever this person was or whatever it was had answered. But we ran up into a family that was camping, and we asked them about the white figure. And they said no, they hadn't seen anybody or heard anybody or anything, that they were the ones who had answered my owl call. So could be our Bigfoot sighting, because there is an account of the Flintville Monster being an albino Bigfoot.
You did the owl call, whoo, whoo.
Yep.
But did it sound just like that when you did it again?
Whoa.
From Hog Holler to the Old Trout Hatchery to Tim's Ford Dam, there are dozens of stories just like David and Ray's. Between the numerous online articles, video interviews, and official reports, I encourage everyone to do their own research. Because it's safe to say the Flintville Monster is one of the most interesting collection of Bigfoot sightings you never knew existed.
I don't know what we could have got if we'd shot that Bigfoot. We got $30 for a fox. We might have got.
Imagine you showed up in Fayetteville with a 6-foot monkey.
Wouldn't that have been
6-foot
fun?
monkey on your truck.